Okay. Hi. Just brief introduction. I'm David Frizesh, founder of Fitness Beast Athletics. This is Jessica Riddell, who is an outstanding university professor and the founder of Hope Circuits, both the book and the project to help reinvigorate life at the university level. Um, Here, would you like to introduce yourself a little, Jessica?
Hi, David. It's so nice to see you after 20 years in
Yeah.
in a different context, in a different lifetime, on a
Yeah.
different campus. So I'm joining you from Bishop's University, which is in the eastern townships of Quebec. It's located on the Abenaki and Wabanaki Confederacy, and it's where I teach and learn and listen and lead. And I'm in my office right now in between two classes. So it is such a
Okay.
delight to connect with you. I am still a Shakespearean, both by training and disposition, see the
Okay.
world through the early modern lens, and yet I feel like we are so early modern, we're now postmodern, and some of the
A little bit.
things that
Yeah.
we learned back then we have forgotten, and we need to renew and remember, especially about the alignment of the body, soul, spirit, and brain,
Yeah.
how we sit in alignment at this moment. And so it's such a treat to be able to talk to you today about the ways in which we can flourish and flourish in all of the aspects of our life.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with you. Like one of the biggest things we're lacking, especially, well, I was lacking as you knew me back when I was close to a little over 300 pounds when I first met you. And I can speak unequivocally about the fact that being in bad shape was horrible for my university career, and going to the gym and getting in better shape was astronomically, I can't think of enough words to say as how good it was for me to get in shape, lose weight, and everything like that, and be able to perform well in your class.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you know what, David? I think that that is such an important piece about this notion of flourishing. And I just finished a course this morning. I'm teaching something called the rhetoric of hope. So, how do we move people from despair and stagnation and disengagement into hope, flourishing, and action? And
Okay.
I was talking to them about this early modern self-help book called The Courtier by Bastigliere Castiglione. Fabulous name,
Yeah, I
fabulous.
was.
I think we talked about it 20 years ago. It was
Yeah.
still old 20 years ago.
Okay.
And the advice that Castiglione gives to people who want to be full, three-dimensional, successful selves is three things. So exercise your mind, read as much as you can. Read literature, poetry, theater, philosophy, mathematics, science. Just be voracious about what you read. Surround yourself with incredible friends who think differently than you do, who bring something different, a unique set of qualities or characteristics. And then the third one, which is most salient to our conversation today, is exercise the body. That you
Yeah.
cannot have exercise the mind and surround yourself with friends without also thinking about your body,
Mhm.
being athletic. And back then, they were playing tennis. They were playing the very earliest versions of soccer. Henry VIII had his first documented soccer cleats. They were playing racquetball. They were wrestling. They were jousting. They were hunting. They were on horseback. They were really, really active. And it
Yeah.
was considered to be the thing. Both men and women, but especially men, had to deliberately and intentionally practice athletic ability in addition to reading and surrounding yourself with an incredible network. And I think those three things are missing. I think we're not integrating those into the way in which we're educating this new generation to go out into the world and to flourish in all senses of the word.
No, 100%. I remember distinctly when I was in university that the despite the fact that, physical fitness did come into it my own like into my life in its own way throughout my own misgivings, so to speak, health wise. Um, it was the biggest wake up call when I realized that it was the one element missing from my academic career that was help me spurn and increase and learn better and kind of engage with what I was learning so much more because physically I was healthy. Physically I was get whether call it endorphins, call it whatever the hell that was going through my body at the time because I was working out. Um, it helped me study better. It helped me kind of advance more and whatnot, right? And if you compare it to a lot of, ancient Greek philosophy, even Roman, you can go back even further, I'm sure. being athletic and being a mind, so to speak, an intellectual were the two most important things in life, aside from, politics, everything like that, but that's a conversation for an entire different thing. But like as far as just living your best life, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I'm teaching Shakespeare this afternoon and we're reading Julius Caesar, and it actually starts with a race. So Mark Antony is racing through the streets of Rome, and it's part of the Lupercalian festival. It's both a celebration of athletic prowess and a celebration of fertility. And so you've got this sort of Roman ideal of athleticism in Shakespeare and in Shakespeare across the canon. And that I think is so important. We've kind of lost that. We've gotten into our own heads. We've gotten into our own navel gazing. We've gotten into our own sort of overdeveloped cerebral brain. We're doom scrolling. Our lizard brains are getting dopamine hits from
Yeah.
doom scrolling. And we're just, all of the things that we need to flourish are around us. They're hiding in plain sight. They're our bodies. Our bodies hold knowledge. Our bodies hold meaning. Our
Mhm.
bodies are not just instruments, not just vehicles, but actually meaning making themselves. And, I had to learn that the hard way. You had to learn that the hard way.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson I think that we often have to learn and relearn as we go through this messy, long life of ours. And,
Yeah.
I said this morning to a group of 120-year-olds. Life is not short, life is long, and we live many lives. And we
Yeah.
always have an opportunity to unfurl and to emerge and to be something different than we are. And I think for me, relearning that my body has meaning, has knowledge, is a way for me to live into alignment to do all of the other things, and is absolutely essential to flourishing. That health affluence is the greatest affluence we can have.
Yeah.
It's something that for me is just an iterative loop that I'm like, all right, universe, okay, gotta learn that again. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That.
And what's interesting about you said, it's kind of like the journey, when you kind of have to go through different iterations of it, right? Even when you're training, right? You go from point A to get to point B, but then from point B, like this is such a trite kind of argument, but like the race to fitness, so to speak, is not an end game. Like there's no goal to achieve. It's something that you continuously have to uptake because you can get injured, things change, your focuses change, but also you age. As you age, you can't do the same things. Like when I used to train without resting in between days and stuff like that, I used to get sore, but now if I train intensely for 2 days, the third day I have trouble walking sometimes, like it's you need the rest, you need to rebuild, you need to recuperate, right? And that's actually kind of leads into kind of what I want to ask you, because I kind of want to introduce you with the hope circuits aspect of things, right? So how you want to look into reinvigorating the university curriculum, reinvigorating how people approach it, and like when it comes to inclusivity, bringing everyone into the conversation. Do you think there's an element and a place for fitness activity in that, and how would you say it associates with kind of your own work and your own foundation that you're creating effectively?
Thank you. Oh, there's so many different directions we can go, and maybe we'll pull a couple of those threads. Um, I started writing this book about hope, and it's called Hope Circuits: Rewiring Universities and Other Organizations for Human Flourishing, at a time where I was not flourishing.
Okay.
So I had to write the book I needed to read. And I had just finished a book called Shakespeare's Guide to Hope, Life, and Learning, where with two of my colleagues, both Shakespeareans as well, we wrote about how Shakespeare and art and theater gives us an opportunity to exercise our critical empathy muscles, our critical hope muscles, and our critical love muscles. And we use that language of the
Okay.
body, but we were using it in ways that were tied to this trinity of values: hope, love, and empathy, and trying to rehabilitate them, trying to figure out how we can find our humanity through these concepts. And so I had just finished writing this book with my two amazing colleagues when COVID hit and everything shut down, and the kids came home from school. They were age 4 and 6. We closed the university. I was sitting in a Senate meeting, and my husband was in the hospital because he had had a series of pneumonias that were
Okay.
clearing up. And so within that week it was March 13th, shut down the university, shut down the schools, and my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. And this guy is a varsity athlete, won a national championship in basketball, is 6'8". The man is deeply annoying in his health focus. This man does not need
And
to learn iterative health, where I fall off the wagon and, live a little hedonism for a while. This guy
at 6'8", he's a giant of an athlete.
He's a giant of an athlete. He's
Yeah.
consistent. He eats smoothies and salads for fun. Like, this man is pure as the
Okay.
driven snow, has never smoked a cigarette in his life. And yet, in the middle of COVID lockdown, gets diagnosed with lung cancer and has his right lung removed. So all of a sudden, I had done this theoretical work, right? This sort of theoretical framework of critical hope through Shakespeare. Great, great, great. And then the universe, and I'm not arrogant enough to think that the universe speaks directly to me, but I think I have lessons to learn. And I
Yeah.
talk to the universe. I'm like, thanks, universe. I didn't want to have to learn that lesson, but I had to learn, first of all, how to use all of the concepts that I had theorized through Shakespeare, anchor them in my own practice, deal with a partner who was peering over the abyss into his own mortality, watching his body fail him after he had treated it so beautifully and so kindly for so long, and manage that with small children in the middle of a global pandemic, and my work sped up. So everything that I did went into hyperdrive. My 5-year plan, I completed it in 6 months because everyone realized, wait a second, we actually need to start collaborating and building and ideating a different kind of system because this one isn't working.
Yeah.
So it was this super fast, compressed space where everything was intense. It was like drinking from a fire hose. And there were a couple of lessons that I needed to learn. First of all, that hope is not the opposite of despair. That you can howl into the abyss, you can feel rage, and you can feel anger, and you can feel disoriented, and that is part of a hope circuit, right? That you can sit in the groundlessness of the present moment and ask some serious questions, and then you reach out and build intentional community. So I just started, yeah.
Sorry, so then would you say then going through that negative kind of aspect of things is just, I guess, attributed more to like the overall conception of what hope is? Like, is it just, is the negative aspect that people go through in a lot of these kind of, I guess, hope circuits, for lack of a better term, is it not only a necessary element of the circuit, and if so, how does the negative element play into it?
Yeah. Well, I think, David, the negative element is always there. We are imperfect humans who love and are heartbroken and work through
Yeah.
a world that is complex, messy, and difficult every day. And when we have our personal dramas as the protagonists of our own plays, but we also have the world around us, our communities, and then larger and broader society, we're living in the middle of eco grief. We're living in the middle of geopolitical instability. We're living in the middle of a time where our civil and just society is under siege. Of course, we're experiencing all of the entanglement of stress. There's never going to be a time where we're not stressed. There's never going to be a time where we are not despairing and full of rage and anger and disorientation and confusion. And that for me is entangled inextricably to joy and pleasure and love and empathy. And that's what I learned at this moment where everything that I thought I knew to be unassailable was all of a sudden up for grabs. So cancer,
Good.
children, COVID, all of those things taught me that it was really scary, and I hid under the covers a lot. And I also had pajama dance parties in the kitchen with my kids. And we also did yoga with Adrian, with the dog and the cat, and all of us
Okay.
in a room together. We had Zoom parties. We had joy. We had joy in the midst of, not despite grief. And so that entanglement for me is you're never going to wait until everything gets better to do the thing that you need to do. That you have to
It'll be waiting too long. Yeah.
way too long. So, I started to go back to fundamentals. I read a lot of poetry, and I didn't read a lot of poetry. I don't even think I taught you poetry because I was scared of it. But
Not just that, you were teaching me a survey course when I was doing it. It was one of my first introductory classes, and yeah, I remember that.
Poetry. I was terrified
Yeah.
of poetry, although we learned poetry through song lyrics like Baby's Got Back, and learned Petrarch and Blaisons from the 16th century through hilarious 80s rap. So
Yeah.
There are ways to get to poetry, but
Yeah.
I found these poems that I just kept going back to and reading. And one of them, there's a question that Mary Oliver asks. She's an American poet, and she says, "Tell us, what will you do with your one wild and precious life?" And I ask myself that question every single day. I still live into that question every day. It's, in fact, a decision making process. And so, if I am tired and I do not want to go for a run, or I don't want to stretch out my frozen shoulder because I'm middle aged, I think, tell me, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And it is to live and to breathe and to leave some of that angst on the trail and to live into the kind of alignment that I know is where I flourish. And so
Okay.
that Hope Circuits piece for me is not just about rewiring universities, although that is the context that I know. So I take a systems level approach, but it is asking all of our organizations. So it can be in education, in healthcare, in government. How do we rewire our systems and structures? What are the rules and policies and laws and statutes that are governing our behavior? What is
Okay.
driving us to act in a particular way and in a particular set of conditions? And what I have discovered is that your exhaustion is a sign that the systems are working, and it's a sign that the systems are broken. So, how do we rewire those systems to not ever talk? I never want to talk about resilience again. I want to talk
Okay.
about flourishing. Resilience is my pet peeve word because resilience literally means, it's the Latin etymology for to recoil or to spring back to status quo.
Yeah.
And when we talk about resilience, we talk about systems that recoil back to status quo. Those status quo systems in our late stage extractive capitalism are harming us. We are
Yeah.
not living in work life balance. We are not centering flourishing as mind, soul, body, heart, all of the things. We're not talking about our feelings. We're yelling at each other. We've seen a dilution of civility and joy, and people are wiped. We see this tsunami of mental health crisis everywhere because we're working and living in broken systems, and
Yeah.
systems that were designed to work exactly the way they are by architects who benefit from this privilege. So what does it mean for us, wherever we are in our sphere of control or influence, to look at the systems around us, to surface them, to say, do they still serve me? Did they ever serve many? And then if the answer is no to one or both of those questions, to have a willingness to rewire them, to look and to
Yeah.
say, you know what, for instance, universities, how do we meet people where they are? How do we do inclusion? How do we create spaces of mattering and belonging? We know that folks flourish when they feel that they matter and they belong, when they're invited into the co-creation process rather than spoken at, yelled at, indicted. We need to invite them into that process. And that at a systems level is absolutely urgent. So that's why I wrote the
Yeah.
book. But I
Okay.
wrote the book because I needed to figure out how to stop hiding under the covers and get out of bed and get into the world. And I still have to reread the book. Like, I read the book all the time because I'm like, right.
Okay. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are tools for this. There are tools to metabolize this moment and develop a mindset. And I think you do that in athletics, and I do that
Yeah.
in systems. What do we do with this moment that feels overwhelming, disorienting, difficult? How do you metabolize it in real time? And how do you build a mindset so that you have the robustness necessary to parse your situation, to understand where you are, and then figure out where you want to go?
Yeah, that's actually, it's funny you mentioned that because one of the biggest things I realized, and like, this is where for me, physical fitness became a huge element to me, is that I can sit down, I can ideate, I can think over things, I can get lost in my own kind of thought bubbles when I'm stuck in my own echo chamber, so to speak, right? But then as soon as I hit the gym, as soon as I do everything I get that physical aspect into it, that echo chamber vanishes. Like I can still see it. I can see arrows. I can see positives aspects of it. I can see different ways of approaching things. And it's all related to the fact that I took a break from strictly mentally focusing on something, doing nothing with my body, to working my body out and coming back, and I feel more rested, energized, despite the fact that I might be more tired. But like it gives me more of a to parrot your word back, a systemic view of what I was looking at because of that physical endurance that I went through to get there, you know? So it's like, it's why like I push physical athleticism so much in everything I do. Even like I'm trying to get clients of that. Like I'm actually getting certified to work with people who are not just train people generally like an athlete, like when you a physical trainer, but people who are in physical states of not to sound like a doomsayer, but decay, for lack of a better term. Like you mentioned frozen shoulder, right? Like I had frozen shoulder in both arms. Well, I'm a type 1 diabetic, so for me, like the chances of getting it are I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a higher if you're type 1 diabetic. And I got them for two separate reasons. This one, the left one I got because I was overtraining, and the right one I got because I stopped training completely to recover the left one. And so it was this whole element that I had to realize. And I was speaking to my physio about it. He's like, yeah, when it comes to training, especially as you get older, you have to balance is extremely important. Don't push yourself to the point that you're going to die, but also don't make it so easy that it's just like breath work. You know, that's not how physical activity works. So it's all about really attuning yourself to that element of balance between killing yourself and not killing yourself. And I think it all kind of correlates with not just the physical aspect of things, but also the mental aspect of things, where it kind of helps everything kind of equate and kind of get status quo, so to speak. It reestablishes a new status quo that you're kind of getting back to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so not to okay, so going back to you for a sec, right? What given everything you do, you're traveling around the world, you're teaching, you're writing books, you're starting organizations, you're doing like you make me feel like I do nothing. Thank you for that, by the way. But so how do you personally integrate fitness and movement into your daily lifestyle? Like how in a way that's not um encompassing to the point that it impedes on your lifestyle, but actually just benefits it. Like, so what do you do?
Yeah. So I think even more basic than that, I can't do any of the things that you just listed without making sure that my body is sustainable.
Okay.
So traveling, going on the planes for long times, standing in front of 1,000 people, sitting at a desk writing, even listening. My osteopath was like, "You have displaced before because you listen with your body out instead of
Okay.
your chin." So all of the work that I do is harming this body in some way. That it is a kind of it's a difficulty. It costs my body something, and so for me to be able to do any of it, I have to be taking care of my body first. So that means that, and I haven't always. My goodness, I've had to learn this lesson the hard way. 2 years ago, I was non-ambulatory. I had a sore hip that turned into a hyperextended knee that turned into a frozen shoulder that went into my C1 to C4. Like it was a complete and utter deterioration. It was it was that sort of domino effect of that
Uh,
goes into deep and chronic and systemic pain. And so
I'm not, I apologize. I'm not laughing because of what you're going through. I feel really bad, but like in my head, I was like, the hip bone's connected to the knee.
leg
Like, I was
bone.
just like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, no, it
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
oh, it was, and it was
yeah.
something that we learn this in kindergarten, and then we forget it. And I go so fast, so far, so quickly that I sometimes am guilty of forgetting the body. And I'm sort of living up here and I'm not living in my body. And so I had to learn that hard lesson again, probably because I hit middle age and I didn't have the same surge capacity as I did in my 20s, which felt superhuman. But I had to gather my resources. I had to stop, slow down, pause, look around me, surface those systems, find my resources. So I immediately found an osteopath, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, and a strength coach. And I said, what I am doing is not working. It is not sustainable, and I will not be able to write my books. I will not be able to be in conversation with folks. I will not be able to travel around the world. I will not be able to teach. I will not be able to parent and to listen. Essential things tied to my purpose. So we went through this rehabilitation process where I had to learn core. I had my strength coach say, like, you run 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers a day and you have no core. Your little legs and arms are flapping around all over the place. You're overcompensating. Your knee is hyperextended. Your leg is kicking out. You are
Yeah.
doing yourself damage every single time you step out on the trail. And yet, for me to be able to understand systems regulation, to go from dysregulation to regulation, I needed to run. But the very
Yeah.
thing that was bringing me back into regulation was the very thing that was hurting me. And so
Okay.
I had to stop, slow down, rest, take baby steps, build foundation, build core, build a deep humility and respect to my body, listen to my body,
Yeah.
and the good news is, and there's no triumphal narrative because it's ongoing and iterative, and I'm only, learning as I go. But I have posted my fastest running time since I slowed down, focused on my core, got really intentional. I am running faster at 46 than I was at 20. I know that because Strava gives me all the gold stars, all the
Yeah.
little medals. And it allows me to go faster. I will sometimes just wake up and have a couple cups of coffee and say goodbye to my babies on a weekend and run a half marathon just because I feel good and can keep going. And that for me is not killing myself, not getting obsessed, not getting into my own head about my training, but to recognize that if I'm going to fulfill my purpose, my telos, right? The classical philosopher said that we're all put on this earth with a telos, with an end
Yeah.
point. Each one of us has a different one. And yet we know when we're tapped into our purpose because our whole bodies light up and we feel good, and we feel good not just here, but everywhere. If I'm going to fulfill my purpose on this earth, which I think is to help people think around systems and find their own flourishing, then I had to be able to do the thing I was asking other people to do. And so now I run, I strength train. I got a sauna. I bought a secondhand sauna on the internet and got it installed. So I like try to sit and slow down. I'm a fast twitch muscle, go, 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 run as
Yeah.
fast as I can in one direction. So I've had to relearn how to slow down, to pause, to meditate, to stretch, to do core work, to just get grounded in my body, and then to listen when things are off kilter, when things are off alignment, to come back. And that's my hope circuit, right? It's not,
Yeah.
the effort is not, or the purpose is not perfection. The purpose is to be attentive,
Yeah.
to build a mindset so that you can metabolize things as they come. I'm going to get stressed out. Like last night, I was super stressed because I had 11 hours of teaching today. I've just come off a big week where I was in BC working with 3 different organizations. I had to take my kids to Scouts and Cubs. I just all over the place. And so I pulled out Henry Burns's, my 9-year-old's tub of Nutella and ate a bunch of spoonfuls. So I'm not perfect. I am, but I had gone for a run. I did a 7K. I was feeling great and a little bit sore after a winter of not being
Yeah.
outside. So it's never going to be perfection. And if I was interested in perfection, if I had that tub of Nutella, then I'd fall off the wagon today and be like, well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go into hedonism. That doesn't work either, right? We are one decision closer to or farther away from our flourishing at any moment, and giving ourselves the grace
One
necessary to
second.
do that is key.
Yeah, my dog is being my dog. One
Hello.
sec.
Yay. That was the best part of COVID was dogs and cats and kids.
Yeah. Yeah. My dog is like a this big fluffy poodle thing that lets himself be known by barking everywhere all the time.
Love
Anyway,
it.
I
I have
apologize.
one. I have a dog and a cat. I have a little
Okay.
poodly little thing. Yeah, they're awesome. They're paying attention to us. They're warning us of danger, and I think that is joyful. So yeah. So where were we? Flourishing.
Um, yes, yes, you're talking about how you needed to effectively, in order to kind of establish yourself and kind of do all the things you had to do mentally and physically, like around the world and stuff like that, and with your own career, you have to find that balance between the mental kind of progress and the physical aspect to kind of conjoin with it, right?
Yeah. And it's so dynamic, right? It's always changing. It's always, so my frozen shoulder has been this hilarious journey for me in perimenopause, right? And this is something that we had never talked about previous generations. We've never talked about women's health. It's never been the default in studying medicine. It's never been the focus of research. It's very
Yeah.
few research dollars connected to it. So I had to go and do my own research. But I had this moment, and you might laugh as a fellow frozen shoulder human, where a couple weeks ago, before I get on the road, I usually do a full like acupuncture, massage therapy, osteopath over the course of about 6 or 7 days. I sort of stagger it out to get myself robust enough to fill up my reserves in order to go out and to do this work. And my massage therapist is wonderful. I see her pretty regularly, and she was working out my shoulder. And at the end of her practice, she was touching that part where I call it my broken wing. Like I have a broken wing
Yeah.
or a sore wing. And she just put her hands there, and then she ended the practice by saying, "There you are." And I felt like she had unfurled my wing, like she had just
Oh
worked on
wow.
it and released it. And there was all of my feelings live in my second rib of my left shoulder.
Okay.
And she released something that I felt a kind of unfurling. And I'm not a hippy dippy, new age human. I'm
Yeah.
pretty robust and practical. I'm from the East Coast, no nonsense. But I felt it. And then she said, "There you are." And it wasn't just like, "There you are, the practice is done." It's like, "I just found you," right? I just
Okay.
released some kind of wisdom in your body that got me in tune or in touch with something that I couldn't have otherwise. And it was so beautiful because it was a gift. It was an offering, but it was also an unveiling or a revealing. There you are.
Okay.
Knowledge trapped in the body, that knowledge in the body for me is a pretty new concept. PhD, Shakespearean
Yeah.
scholar, right? Lives right here, just right here. In fact, like right here.
Yeah.
That kind of unfurling, I think, is really important. And I think that because we've got a medical system that is built on deficit, disease, illness, loss, lack, crisis, scarcity, we are not sitting in conversations around flourishing, abundance, pleasure, joy, love that lives in the body.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, right? My doctor, when he was going over the not just the medications and everything like that, like when I stopped taking the medications, because effectively it made me feel horrible. Like I'm generally an extroverted person. This medication that he gave me that had a possibility of a chance of working, which is the best on the market, um, made me a completely different person. Like I said, I'm an extrovert by nature, but this completely killed everything. I was not excited for life. Like I'd function because I'd wake up, I was no longer tired, and I would just go through the day in the most unengaging human being on the planet. Like I could see the something that I would love. Like I could see if there was like I'm big into the romantic era, so William Blake and Wordsworth and all that kind of stuff, right? So like I could see like a festival of celebrating all of that, and I would look at it and just be to get a little bit academic now, stuck in the world of what's it called experience, as Blake would say it, but from a different perspective. Like I'd look at it and I wouldn't engage with it. I wouldn't find anything of interest in it. Like it completely killed my personality. So when I stopped doing that and I kind of took over my life with fitness to kind of get that better kind of handle on things, it completely revitalized everything. Not just my form, but also my mental capacity to be able to engage with people, to be able to go after the mental stuff that really, really, really touched me, that I really enjoyed doing, whether it was English literature, whether it was poetry specifically, whether it was philosophy. Like I love Lacan. I love the concept of how he does it, how he approaches like the other when it comes to like I like taking that philosophy and going to literature and stuff like that. So it's the that whole concept was I didn't realize how intrinsically entangled with the physical it was, because I never thought that it was my brain, like for me, I'm like, that's my muscle. This is my brain. That's a different aspect, but then realizing the connective aspect that it has with each other, especially when you get into the physiology of the human beings, endorphins and all the other kind of different hormones that go through your system. It was such an eye-opening revelation to me going, okay, yeah, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans weren't wrong. There was something here about being physically active and mentally stable at the same time.
Yeah. And I would even fast forward, totally biased as an early modernist, and think about Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. You know that picture of
Yeah.
the naked man with his
Yeah.
arms and legs spread out, and there's a circle and a square,
Hmm.
and that perfect physical specimen of a body. The arms are touching the circle, which is the heavens, and the square, which is the earth, our material world.
Yeah.
And the body there is the most perfectly anatomically correct body, built from Vitruvius, who was a Roman architect who believed that the proportions of the human body were the proportions of the divine, that you could unlock the access to the divine through the circle of the ear.
Yeah.
Through, we saw that in the Da Vinci
Da
Code.
Vinci Code. Yeah, I was just thinking about
But it's
that.
from Vitruvius, who
Yeah.
was a Roman architect who built temples and buildings based on human physical proportions, because his idea was if the gods made humans, then the
Yeah.
gods imprint in their own image, then the gods imprinted divine meaning into our bodies, and we have immanence, which means we have access to the divine all around us, to different kinds of knowledge, and then we can unlock it. And so Da Vinci, 2,000 years later, bringing Vitruvius back to imagine what it looks like for a perfectly proportioned human at the center of the divine and the earthly spheres, and then what that looks like for knowledge, for flourishing, for humanity. And so, gosh, we know all this, we know all these things, we just need to remember them. And I think I love your work because you're doing training and physical, but you're also bringing in, you're literary trained, you are a close
Yeah.
reader, you are interested in stories and storytelling, you're interested in knowledge and wisdom from the ages about what makes us human, which includes fallibility, mortality, deterioration,
Yeah.
despair, but also the joy and vividness of living in this moment. And I think that there is a vividness connected to vitality and flourishing that we need to reintegrate that body and the mind and the spirit
Yeah.
in community with one another. So I'm so glad that you're doing this work. I'm so grateful to participate in this conversation with you.
Definitely, and I appreciate speaking with you because I've actually been like when I've been looking at the stuff you've been doing with Hope Circuits, and I especially love the concept of wanting to integrate more voices into the concept of how education systems should be run, how they should be more incorporated. Because like I'm not gonna lie, when I was going to Concordia, it to say that it was the educational system was pretty much not just obfuscating other voices that weren't, octogenarian, old and white, is an understatement. You know what I mean? And especially since it was very male dominated as well. Even though at the time women were performing so much better at higher education levels than men, even back then. There's an element to it that I think attributes to all genders across the spectrum. Like I'm talking about male and female, not gender equality. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like male and female, and how physical fitness plays into such an important role for both aspects of that, not just in the mental state, but also the physical aspect of things. Where it'll help you learn, it'll help you approach things, it'll help you be able to take on life full fledged, but also it'll keep you healthy. Like going back to your husband. I forget if it was actually just before this conversation we talked about the lung cancer. If you don't mind me bringing it up,
Yeah.
so he had like part of it removed. Given the fact that to equate your 6'8" athlete of a husband, do you think his physical fitness has helped his progression since the surgery? Like how has he been able to uptake it? Like how, granted, the fact that he was physically fit prior, obviously I'm sure helps a lot, but how has his physical, I guess, recovery changed, and or how has it gotten better, not only because of his past as an athlete, but because he's still doing it now? He's still pushing himself now. How would you say that attributes to his personal health?
Hmm. I think you should interview him because I think he's probably a better narrator of his own story than I am.
Mm.
I think it was a journey that it was really difficult to have a body that you have treated really well fail you, right?
Yeah.
Especially as an athlete. And I think that it both helped and hindered the relationship that we have with our bodies, right? I've always overlooked my body. I've always taken my body for granted. I have always pushed my body way past its limitations without consequence until recently. And so, um, I think that's very different if you identify as an athlete and you identify as that as part of your health. So I would suggest asking him his story because I think it's an interesting one, but it is really underlying for me that we have a relationship with our bodies,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it is absolutely, sometimes it's ambivalent, sometimes it's neutral. Like I didn't really think about my body ever
Okay.
until recently, until it stopped working. So, I think there's the relationship we have to our body we don't talk about often, but I think it's really important that we do. And then we think about what stories we're telling about ourselves and are they serving us? Did they ever serve us? And then what else is possible?
But that also taps on something that you said, that you weren't really paying attention to your body till it stopped working, right? I think that's a fundamental flaw and aspect of being human. Like we do things until it doesn't work. Then once it doesn't work, we're like, okay, now I need to fix it. Not, okay, I need to optimize the way I do things so it doesn't get to that point, so I don't have to go there and revisit it and start over
Some people
again,
are good at that, David. Some people are really good. They've got great self-regulation. They've got great integrity. They're like earnestly proactive about it. And I think it's personality too. And I think it's, where we gravitate. And, I've never had a
Yeah,
problem with my body. I've just never paid attention to it. So,
that's fair.
um, that I think this is where the messy journey, this is where Hope Circuits happen,
Yeah,
is right. We're constantly unfolding.
yeah.
We're living many lives in this one lifetime. We're learning lessons from the universe over and over. And I think there's a beautiful entanglement there that I'm still working through and thinking through. And I really appreciate the thought prompts you've given me today. I might go right now and write about it because it's
Well,
beautiful
if
and
if
thoughtful.
you do, let me know. I'd love to read about it. It's okay. Well, we've been speaking for almost an hour now, so I'm going to let you go because I know you have a huge business thing. But before we go, is there anything you would like to tell us more about Hope Circuits, about your upcoming work? You said just before that you're writing a lot more stuff that's coming up. Is it related to Hope Circuits? Is it something completely new? Like, what are you doing?
So I'm writing Hope Circuits 2.0 right now. So it's
Okay.
creating the blueprints for human and ecological flourishing. I'm finishing a chapter called How to Human in the Rise of AI. So how do we
Oh,
get back
cool.
to and remember our humanness? And part of that is body, part of that is living in our bodies, not just as instruments or vehicles, but as really important meaning making. As the robots are coming, as our traditional human activities are being rendered obsolete and irrelevant, there's a moment right now where I think we need to remember who we are. We need to go back to fundamentals. We need to ask questions about what makes us human that is distinct from general and generative AI. And then I think we need to double down on all of our systems, our education, our healthcare, our government, to make sure that we are not rendered obsolete or irrelevant, that we are sitting in the messy, frustrating, circuitous, wonderful, divergent experience, the entanglement of grief and gladness, the entanglement of hope and despair at this moment. Because all I can say is the systems aren't working anymore. They
Yeah.
may never have been working. And we're at this moment, we're at this critical tipping point where we have an opportunity, an invitation to remember how to human, and how to human
Yeah.
is a verb. And I think
Yeah.
physical activity is absolutely entangled in that flourishing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks
A
for
hundred percent.
thanks for chatting with me. It's such a
For sure.
treat to see you. 20
Definitely.
years.
At
We've
20
got we've
years.
gotten better.
Yeah. And
We finished this wine.
okay, I want to send you and your husband some free merch. So okay, and so just let me know color, sizes, and stuff like that. We can get to that after. Just to go quick rundown about Fitness Beast. It's not just to help people with MS and type 1 diabetes like I had, but right now it's only a clothing line because I'm in the process of getting certified to help people like that. But the clothing line with it is my goal is to not only sustain myself and earn a living, but also to I want to use profits the like percentage of the direct profits you made, so not from the sales that are coming from customers, but from any money that I could potentially make for it to donate to the MS Society and type 1 diabetes in order to create foundations where we can use physical fitness as a way to start helping people beyond just the medication and beyond just the thing. Like, I'm not saying don't see your doctors. Absolutely, I'm not a doctor, so I'm never going to say that. Take your insulin. I mean, you have to, but take whatever medications you have, but also to incorporate physical health into your life as well. So, yeah, with that, I think we're going to cut it off there to give you Pat to go back to teaching, and I will coordinate with you afterwards for sizes, colors, all that kind of stuff for the sweater for you and your husband. And once we're live, I'll tell you, and I'll send it out to all the people that you know, and we'll go from there.
Amazing. David, thank you so much for your work. It's so important.
And you as well, Jessica. Thank you so much both for your teaching back when and for everything you're doing now, especially with your approach to wanting to rethink the way the system of higher education and, well, the world in general, but specifically higher education because I like higher education. So specifically to how that could be wired to help people thrive in all these institutions.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Definitely. Bye.